Welcome back to Chinatown Museum's History Matters live stream. Today's show is entitled What You Should Know About Filipino Food with Feliz Santa Maria in collaboration with Musea Pambata and Adarna House. I'm Yuri Tumura, the museum officer and your host for the Saturday live streams. Food is more than just nourishment for the body. It holds stories from our past. Today, Tita Feliz will be talking about what makes Filipino food Filipino. We hope parents, teachers, and kids alike are ready to tune in because today's show is a talk for all ages. Feliz Prudente Santa Maria has been a veteran culinary historian and cultural heritage advocate for over 4 decades. Her writings on food and culture offer a taste of history that aims to understand who we are by what we eat. Some of her award-winning books include A Cultural Worker's First Manual, Essays in Appreciating the Everyday, The Governor General's Kitchen, and The Foods of a Sarizal Country. Currently, she is a trustee at the Philippine National Museum, a member of the Ayala Museum Board of Advisors, and the vice president and co-founder of the Food Writers Association of the Philippines. So our talk for today will have a flow because the talk will be based on the book. It will begin with food from nature, to be followed by the old-fashioned kitchen, after which we will talk about cooking outside the home and heritage tables. Tita Feliz, welcome on to the show. What? Okay. We're having a few issues at the moment, so we're kind of just dealing with that. How are you guys doing? At the comment section below, please let us know. What is your favorite Filipino food? Tell us, because, I don't know, we might discuss it later. We might talk more about its history. We might maybe have it on our show. We'll see. Okay, Tita Feliz, welcome on to the show. Since our show is called History Matters, let's open with why history matters to you.
History is so important because if we know a lot about the past, then we're not going to make the same mistakes they made before. And the wonderful things that they did before, we are not going to lose. That's what it's all about. A lot of times people think that food history is only about collecting recipes, old recipes, and learning to cook them in the way our grandmother used to cook them. But as you'll see today, food history incorporates the history of nature. That's one. Food history includes the history of nature. And two, food history is about being inventive. So many wonderful inventions have been made because of cooking. Thirdly, the history of food is about the history of fighting hunger. None of us want to get hungry, and we don't want other people to get hungry. And lastly, the history of food is a history of how we celebrate, how we make friends with food, and how food makes us happy. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Okay. So one of your opening lines, I guess, is the history of food is also the history of nature. So can you tell us more about this? So I think the first 3 chapters of the book talk about food from the land, air, and water.
That's right. A lot of you are probably familiar already in school with the words like being environmentally correct, conservation of the environment, words like that. Well, it's all important because our food depends on how safe the soil is, on how safe the water is, on how safe the air is. There was a time in Europe when they had what they called black rain. The rain that came down to fertilize their fields was polluted. And so all of their harvest for that year, they couldn't eat. And then the cattle couldn't eat it either. They couldn't eat what was growing in the fields. So that was really a very bad time in Europe. here in the Philippines, we've had instances of red tide. Remember that, the red tide?
Yeah.
So when there's red tide, we can't eat the oysters, we can't eat the shellfish, we can't eat the fish. And then we have fish kill. We always see that in the newspaper, fish kill. All of that is related to the history of nature.
So Filipino food knowledge, habits, and preferences create the unique Philippine culinary heritage. So I think while we were preparing for this talk, we talked about that, our culture is more than just the food itself. So there's a lot of practices surrounding it, like how we serve the food, how we eat the food, who we eat the food with, that affects, I guess, our heritage, as you say.
That's right. Heritage is simply what we inherit. That's all it is. What do we inherit from the past? Firstly, we think of what we inherit from our parents and our grandparents. We inherit from them the foods they like, the way to cook them, the way to serve them. What foods do we eat when we're feeling sad? What foods do we eat when we're not well? All of that, we inherit the knowledge. So it's very important that we look into our past. We look into what our elders are doing. That's our inheritance. That's part of the heritage, food heritage.
So one of our first topics for today is rice. So please comment down below. Can you live without rice? Is it a meal without rice, or is it simply merienda? Comment it down below, and then maybe we'll bring up some of your answers a little further along into the talk. So Tita Feliz, in your book, you talked about, like you brought it up, like, is it a meal without rice? So can you please answer that? Do you think it's a meal without rice?
Well, I think many Asians, not just Filipinos, but many Asians really want to have rice with their meal. I mean, you feel that if there's no bowl of rice, no serving of rice, then you're not really having a meal. And even our merienda, isn't it? Even our merienda includes things that are made of rice. And, rice is getting a bad reputation in some places now. So you really have to understand this. They're saying maybe rice isn't good for us. I think part of the issue is how much rice are we eating? We should only eat the amount that we really need. So if we eat rice, it's a very good energy food. For athletes, they recommend white rice because it's a quick energy giver. But now, of course, they're saying that we should be eating the brown rice because it has more fiber in it, and it's kinder to the body system, and we're less prone to getting diabetes, which is a very, very big issue, not only in the Philippines but globally. So I think the important thing is for us to remember that if we like to eat rice, then we should control the amount we eat so we don't get sick. I think that's number one. The other reason that rice is sometimes being criticized is because rice needs a lot of water to live. That's why the International Rice Research Institute in Los Baños has been trying to create new types of rice that don't need as much water as a natural variety of rice would need. I think what this points to is every single grain of rice that we eat is very important. It's extremely valuable because every grain represents water. How much water was needed to grow that one little grain of rice. See, food is really very valuable. In our history, we had everyday rice, isn't it? But we also had party rice. And I don't know, is this the time that I'm supposed to talk about the party rice?
Yeah, go ahead.
We had, isn't it, how many kinds of rice can you think of? Have you ever gone to the market or the supermarket and seen that there are quite a number of varieties of rice? But once upon a time, if it was a party, if it was a fiesta or a special occasion, they wanted to have rice with color. Isn't it? We have rice, some kinds of rice that are naturally colored. They're naturally black, or they're naturally kind of reddish brown. That's party rice. And the other really, really important party rice before was colored with yellow ginger, with turmeric. And we have that today in our bringhe. Bringhe from Pampanga is colored with turmeric. And then when the Spanish came, they added their own rice, which was the paella. They didn't always call it that, but the paella was colored with saffron. Then they adjusted. They couldn't find saffron here, so they found a Philippine coloring agent called kasubha. I don't know if some of you may have had that in your arroz caldo. For us in the family, you can't have arroz caldo without the kasubha, which is a little flour that's dry. So we make distinctions between what is ordinary rice and what is special occasion rice. That's how important rice is to us.
Okay, everyone. So after all this talk about rice, how do you cook your rice? Comment it down below. Is it via a rice cooker, B, a metal pot, or C, if you're really hardcore about your rice, do you cook it by clay pot? So it's what? Yeah, it's a poll. There will be options down below, and then just click it. And we prefer that you click it, but if it doesn't show up, you're free to comment it on the comments. So yeah, while we wait for the answers, maybe we can move on to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Tita Feliz, how do you cook your rice nowadays?
Well, I cook it in a metal pot. I don't own a rice cooker. I've never used one. And I have nothing against it, don't get me wrong. But when I was only 7 years old and I was already cooking. And one of the first things I learned to cook was rice. And in those days, you put the rice in a metal pot and then you stuck your finger in, your middle finger, this way. And you had to put enough water for it to reach the middle of your finger. Of course, when you're a little girl, your finger is shorter than the finger of an adult.
Yeah.
So your rice was always a little dry. But then I realized, I went up and I went to the yaya and I said, Yaya, I want to see your finger. And I realized that at 7, I had to put a little more water. But the way I cook rice is, of course, the way I was taught. But we've been cooking rice in the Philippines for over 3,500 years. I mean, talk about heritage, talk about inheritance. The whole idea of having rice at a meal is really old for us. And when they didn't yet have metal pots and they didn't yet have the clay pot that Yuri mentioned, how do you think did we cook rice? Because you can't eat rice raw. So they would take the bamboo. The country was rich with bamboo. And there were bamboos that were very wide. And you could cut a segment of that. And there were 2 ways of using it. You could either cut the top off, fill it with rice and put water and then wrap it up so that it wouldn't open. Then you put that into the ash, into the burning ash, or you could stand it up. That was another way. You could fill a bamboo tube vertically and then cover it with leaves on the top and make sure that the leaves don't fall off. Then you put that tube into a pot, into the mouth of a pot, and you let the water at the bottom of the pot boil, and then your rice cooks inside the bamboo tube.
Oh my God.
It's very tasty, very tasty. And whether it's the bamboo tube or the clay pot, you know, sometimes people put banana leaves so that the rice doesn't stick to the container, and the banana leaves give a nice flavor to it. Yeah, and then you put there are all sorts of things you can do.
Okay, so the poll results are kind of in. Yeah, and 79% says they cook it via rice cooker, 21% says metal pot, and then no one said clay pot. So yeah, I guess the winner is still rice cooker. So
Right. Well, you know, in the olden days, in Pangasinan, they believed that there would be a magic pot. And that magic pot wouldn't just give you rice. Well, it was important that it gave you rice. But that magic pot that they called the Banga Ikaibaan was a fairy. It's like the fairies of the land. They were the ones who would make sure that this magic pot would always give you enough food. So enough food to feed your family. And if you had guests, there was always enough food for them. So that's part of the Filipino stories, the old stories, the magic pot. So that's something that we shouldn't forget, that rice is that important. And so is the pot. Maybe we need a magic rice cooker now.
Yes, I would really want to buy a
magic rice cooker. And that it will cook the rice for you. See, that's the important thing.
Okay, so the other foods that are endemic to the Philippines include mango, coconut, kamote, sugarcane, and banana. So yeah, aside from rice, these are also big influences in our diet here.
Well, I think I think you may have heard the expression that the coconut tree is the tree of life.
Tree of life, yeah.
Right? And it's a tree of life because every single part of it can be useful. You know, a coconut tree can live to be 100 years old. Its first 50 years, that's when it's most prolific. It can produce anywhere from 50 to 200 nuts every year. But the thing is, it takes 1 year for a nut to mature. So if you need a mature nut to make coconut milk, for instance, then you have to wait for 12 months, which is why you try to have you hope that you have staggered coconut trees. You know, the coconuts growing are staggered. Of course, if it's a young nut, then we have buko juice, which is also very healthy. You know, before, if you were traveling on a boat, and once upon a time in the Philippines, everybody traveled by boat. There were no roads. Remember that. We had no roads. We only had big rivers and small rivers and smaller than small rivers. And everybody traveled by boats of different sizes. Big boats, little boats, or we walked. That was all. And so what would be a very good emergency ration to have on your boat? Buko. Because it gave you flesh and it also gave you water. Yes, you had juice. So the coconut was really important. What's very curious is think of your geography classes. You know, the children who are watching in. You know where North America, Central America, and South America are. And on the west coast of the Americas is the big Pacific Ocean, and that is common to the Philippines. Well, all the coconuts on the west coast of the Americas came from Asia. They came from Polynesia, Asia, from the Philippines. And then if you go to the east coast of the Americas, their coconut is slightly different. The bottom is a little more pointy.
Yeah.
Our coconuts are curved at the bottom, but those coconuts are a little pointy, and they are an African variety of coconut. But the coconut itself came from Asia. See, but there were two kinds. There was one that was from the insular area and Malaysia and Indonesia that went to the west coast of America, and then the other one that was in India that went through Africa, and from there landed in the Americas. So you never know. You never know where your botanicals, where your food plants are going to go.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, they had no coconut originally.
Yeah,
they come in from Asia. See.
So sugar cane is also another plant that has juice, right?
Right. And I think for those of you who are near the Binondo Museum, who live near there, it's very easy for you to get sugarcane juice.
Yes.
Now, if you're enjoying sugarcane juice, that is something that we had in the Philippines even when Magellan arrived. They could see Filipinos chewing. They would chew. They didn't have the machine that we have now to cut the sugar cane. You had to use a knife before, and they would chew. So that you chew on the sugar cane for the juice, and then you would have to dispose of all the fiber. So it's a very ancient botanical in the Philippines. In those days, though, we still didn't know how to take the sugarcane juice and make it into sugar cakes. So instead, what is older than sugarcane for sweetening in the Philippines? Honey. Isn't it nowadays we get honey from Palawan, honey from the Cordilleras? Okay. That is another very ancient inheritance that we thankfully can still have today. Honey. Pure, natural honey. So the sugar cane came later. And India was ahead in terms of turning sugar juice into white, sand-like sugar. And the Chinese emperor wanted to learn how to do that, and he sent a team to India to teach the Chinese technicians of the emperor how to make white sugar. And that white sugar was imported into Manila when we still were not making white sugar. So everything has got some kind of a story, you know.
So I noticed with our slides is that we have a lot of, I guess, like sweet leaning foods. So we have the rice, the sugar cane, and now we have the kamote.
Right, the kamote. And what's very confusing about the kamote story, that many of us who are looking into either food history or botanical history, nutritional history, what we're all trying to understand is, how did the kamote get here? You know, when you say kamote, technically, the kamote is a sweet potato. And those of you there, come on, kids, you look up sweet potato. It has a scientific name. It's very important to understand how science tries to organize what exists in the world, you know. And so it's I think they call it, I have to read, Convolvulsea. That's the family of the sweet potato. But what do you think? Do you think ubi? That is ube a sweet potato to you? Is it a type of kamote?
I read the book.
Yes.
So it's technically like ube is separate from sweet potato, but we kind of just lump it under one category.
We call it kamote.
Yeah.
See, the ube is technically a yam. And a yam is a Dioscorea family. So they're not even related at all. And then there's so you wonder, how did those things get here? And all of them, by the way, all of them began, the point of origin of both the sweet potato and the yam and the white potato for French fries. All those are from South America. But they went all over the world. Once Europeans got there, or once, now they're saying once Polynesians got to South America, then maybe they brought the sweet potato or the yams to different parts of the world. And why are sweet potatoes and yams and white potatoes important? Because when there's no rice, that can be a substitute. That's why it's important. Oh, here we have banana and mango. There is usually the old folks used to say, they'd ask the children, so I'll ask you, but you already know the answer, I think. What is the fruit? There are pictures there. What is the fruit that you have to make into a flour before you can eat it? So which of the two? The banana. And the mango, the old story, I mean the old riddle, they would ask the children, which is the fruit that is a hanging heart? Because a mango looks a little bit like a heart. So there, if you're asked, you're asked in school, can you provide us with a riddle? You'll say, yeah, what is the fruit that you have to first make into a flour before you can eat it? And what is the hanging heart? So you have two riddles right there. But in the Philippines, the original mango is not the mangoes that we eat now, the big, luscious, beautiful orange mangoes. No. What we have, which is endemic to the Philippines, although now that's being questioned, but once upon a time it was always endemic only to us, is a mango that's only the size of my thumb. That's called paho. And that is endangered. So it's on what they call the Ark of Taste. Anything that's food that could be endangered, they put now into a global list. Like Noah's Ark, they call this the Ark of Taste. So the Philippine mango is in the Ark of Taste. So we were talking about food from the land, and now we have food from the water, and food from the water. So, as I had said earlier, we have to deal with the issues of water getting warmer. I think that's something that you're probably taking in your science classes. It is not to be taken lightly that the water is getting hotter. If the water gets hot, that means that the fish will die. The other thing that should not be taken lightly is like when we go to the beach, because I'm sure after all of this, we're going to be able to go back and go to the beach and do our visits to watch the butanding and things like that. Okay. The shoreline of all these beaches and the edges of all the rivers where we take the river cruises, like in Bohol, as visitors, we have to do everything to keep them clean. Otherwise, all the little fish, the baby fish that are growing in the coral reefs, those will die. And we won't have any more of the fish that we need to eat. Like the maming fish. I think we have a picture of the maming fish.
Yes.
Or
That's
the
the
maming
photo.
fish. The maming fish, for instance, that is on the endangered list. It's a wrasse.
Yes.
And you say, why, what's so important about this? Why can't we just keep, catching the maming fish and eating it? And by the way, the maming fish was liked by our Spanish colonizers. It's listed as one of the best fish that you could find in the Philippines. The maming fish lives in the coral area, in the coastal coral area. And it eats a type of thorny sea animal that's there. And it keeps that sea animal population in check. So what's happening now is it's imbalanced. We have all of these little thorny things they're growing. You can't get into these reefs. And then the little fish that should be there are also unable to thrive there because of these thorny types of sea creatures. So sometimes we want to eat something because we've been taught that it really tastes very good. But we need to tell ourselves, should we or shouldn't we? So that's important. Like, look what's happening to tawilis. The tawilis in Taal Lake. It's threatened Yuri, by things like volcanic eruptions. The water gets hot because of the volcanic eruption. And then it gets threatened by, like the maming fish, by over-harvesting. So again, we as responsible eaters, we have to also choose wisely what we are going to eat, knowing that what we eat is part of a very big, big ecosystem. Look at the maming fish. Now the coastal reefs are in balance. So that's why I said that the history of food is also the history of nature. It's very important that we understand this. Where are we now?
So now we're going to talk about something lighter. So I think a while ago we talked about endangered species. So for now we'll move on to the sausawan. So what we eat these things with.
Oh boy. I'm thinking of all of you who are listening in. There's something wonderful about Filipino culture that is expressed in fashion, in food, in music, in television soap operas, in all of these ways that we entertain ourselves. That is the fact that we Filipinos like diversity. We like to have many different kinds of things all together on a table. We like to have many different kinds of fashion. We like fashion as it keeps changing. It's part of our culture. We're excited when there's something new. We want to try it. Not like others, isn't it? They're just going, no, don't eat that. Don't eat that. No, let's try it. Let's try. And what do we do with vinegar? Sometimes we want the vinegar to be it to be picante. So what do? We either put crushed black pepper, or we put different kinds of sili. We put that in there. Or we get garlic, fresh garlic, we pound it. Garlic is also very picante. It's also maanghang. We put it in there. What else is maanghang? Naturally, ginger. Yeah. When it's raw, try biting into ginger. isn't it? It's also a bit picante, no?
Yes.
So we can take vinegar and turn it into so many different flavors. And then we can mix. We put all those things together in the vinegar. And it's just one of the sauce. You know. So we dip it at charas. And we have the mango that's been brined.
Yes.
It's crispy kind I love. I eat it, just I eat it the way it is. But there's the soft one, and then you mash it up. So that you mash that up, and then you mix that into your food, or you can dip things into that. And then we have sauces. So many kinds of sauces. For lumpia, you've got to have the sauce. And what do you do with the sauce? You add more garlic. In other words, whatever we're eating, we can adjust it so that it's the flavor we like. And if 10 minutes later, we think we want it sweeter, for instance, then we add something that's sweet. If 10 minutes later, the same food, we want it saltier, then we add a little bit of the soy sauce. Maybe in the soy sauce, there's also a little bit of chili pepper. That's the Filipino way to eat, to enjoy many different flavors all at the same time. We like to please ourselves that way. So
yes,
that's
very
Filipino.
Also, what's very Filipino, I think, is the communal sense of eating. So,
definitely.
yeah.
And
the
thing is, communal sense of eating, and everybody's eating the same dish with different sausawans and eating it all in a different way, but all eating the same kind of food, And then now, isn't it, we were talking about this earlier, how now there are things like you can buy Mang Tomas, the lechon sauce, and then you can buy all kinds of ketchups and sweet and sour chili sauces. And so now things that before never used any of those sauces are now using them. I mean, like you have Mang Inasal, they put it on hot dog. And then I just learned from all of you at Chinatown Museum that you can get machang. And then you can eat machang with ketchup.
Yes, tomato ketchup.
I was telling them that I eat it with soy sauce. And I eat it with soy sauce, even if there's already soy sauce there.
Yeah.
But anyway. So I mean, this is Filipino style eating. We're adventurous. But if we don't like it, we'll never have it again. So we have to remember that. We're also picky. But that's the culture. Okay, so we're now with that wonderful old-fashioned kitchen. I wonder how many of our guests have been to the heritage houses. Because if you go to heritage houses, one of the most interesting parts of the building is usually the kitchen,
Yes. And all the things that are inside that are also very, very different from what we have now.
Well, it's because, as we were saying earlier, the history of food is the history of inventiveness.
Yes.
So it's not only inventing new ways to enjoy traditional foods like machang by putting ketchup on it or soy sauce, or pizza. I mean, pizza. And now I know that some of us, I don't know how the pizza makers are going to think, but they're going to think. But some of us get the Thai sweet and sour sauce, and we put that on top of an Italian pizza. But that's inventiveness. But so is what we have in the kitchen. And this is inventiveness to make things easier. You make it easier. Like that. Look at that beautiful, beautiful painting. That's the Amorsolo painting. And I think that I'm correct, right? That's the Amorsolo
Yes,
painting.
that's Amorsolo.
And every Filipino must remember that. Look at the lighting on the face of the woman. It's all from the flame of the kalan, the kalan that is shoe shaped. So that's the typical old-fashioned kitchen. And the kalan, the reason the kalan was important is because it's movable.
Yeah.
Before we would cook on 3 stones on the tuko or versions of that. And sometimes you would cement the stones in place. But if you were, let's say, on a trading boat, how are you going to cook? You need to have a portable stove. And the kalan was one of those portable stoves. The one that looks like a shoe, you can put firewood. There are others that are just cylindrical,
Yeah.
with a little tower. And those are for charcoal.
Mm.
But that is really easier than trying to do a cooking on a campfire.
Yeah.
This concentrates the fire. So it is an invention. It is something that at that point in time was a major invention. Even the palayok. The palayok, you can reuse it. But think about the bamboo I was talking about before. The bamboo, you cut it and you throw it. What if you don't have bamboo? If you have a palayok, which you can re-clean, wash it, reuse it. So again, you see how there was inventiveness. And then how do you cook? You need a spoon. So you need a sandok.
Okay, so that's the sandok. We're just circling it for you guys.
Oh, what's the next picture?
The next photo is by Ben Laksina from your book, Household Heirloom and Antiques.
Right, so you can see there on the kitchen table, all these different vegetables that we are still eating today. But you'll notice there's something like a little box there without a top. And that used to be one way of measuring grain, the ganta.
Yeah.
Which I don't think we use anymore. And that's a typical kitchen. My grandmother's kitchen in the province was like that. What are the other pictures that we have? Oh, here. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Okay. So we want all our food clean, all the wrappers of the food. We have to be sure that they're disinfected before they come into the house. Well, when cholera was the pandemic of the times, and water could be contaminated, and so water filters were very important, and they used charcoal. Those are all different forms of water filters. What else do we have? Because I know we're way beyond the middle where we should be.
We have the metate.
Oh, look at that. That you hardly see anymore.
Yeah.
But that comes from Mexico because the cacao is the cacao tree that is used for chocolate, that originated in Mexico. That originated during the Mesoamerican time. And drinking cacao, that was the power drink of the last Aztec emperor, Montezuma. So there's how you can make chocolate using those little cakes, the little chocolate cakes.
The tablea.
The tableas. Now, notice, that's the old-fashioned style. So what has happened to the tableas? Tableas are also available now in powdered form. You can buy powdered tablea and you just mix it. And it's important we know that if we are not willing to go to all the trouble of making chocolate in the old-fashioned way, then we're going to lose something that's very important to our culinary heritage. You know, in the like I have this. Look at this. This is the batidor. You saw it in the picture.
That's such a pretty batidor.
Now, in Mexico, they have these little bracelets. They added bracelets to it. But in the Philippines, this is the one we have. It's more for mashing.
Yeah.
It's more you can mash it rather than froth it. Whereas this one, they're more interested in the froth. And we call it batidor here, but the original word for that was chicoli. The Mexican word for it never transferred. Instead, we got the Spanish word, the batidor. So I certainly hope that you will look into enjoying chocolate the Filipino way. The American version of chocolate is milk flavored with chocolate. The Filipino version is almost like pure chocolate.
Yeah.
And it's enough to wake you up. So look at this. You see how small this little cup is?
Yes, it's barely the size of your palm.
Right, see? And on it says amistad, friendship. There are others that say amor, recuerdo, all these nice little wishes that you have for the people who are at the table with you or having merienda with you. So this is the size of the traditional chocolate beverage. You didn't drink more than this because it was so thick and it was so pure. You didn't have a lot of milk. You had a lot of chocolate. It was so thick that you could get a biscuit or a little chunk of saba or a little chunk of kamote, and it would stand. You just put it in the cup and it would stand. And you were supposed to use that to help scoop out whatever thick chocolate, yes, was stuck to the edges of the cup. That's the Filipino way. They call that sopas, the biscuit or anything that you use to scrape up whatever was left in the cup. That was the sopas. So again, we shouldn't lose that, the sopas. Ah, look at that. See, inventiveness. That stove, that's already from the 1930s, that certainly made cooking a lot easier than cooking on a kalan. And that was the invention of a Filipino, Ciriaco Tuason. He was really an inventor. He lived in Pandacan. And he was able to get a US patent for his invention. And because it was made in the Philippines, it was certainly a lot cheaper than the imported stoves that were on the market. So again, you see, this shows how it's important that our sciences are as active as our arts. Both of them are important to inventiveness, to being creative, to having solutions for whatever be the difficulties of the time. I think we're now midway. And there's the kudkuran that's always called, the riddle there is, what is the kitchen horse? Because you could ride on the kudkuran. You sat on it and then you put the coconut where the little metal part is. And then you scrape.
So, is this specific to the coconut? So it's like the palayok for the rice. Is it only for like one purpose?
The palayok. Well, the palayok, you had lots of palayoks of different sizes. But in the Philippines, because you didn't want the rice to get any taste other than rice, you had one pot that was strictly for rice and one sandok, one spoon that was strictly for the rice. Then that kudkuran, that's really for coconut. We never
With the coconut.
I have never trying to rasp, let's say, papaya when I make pickles. I don't use that to make my pickles. I don't know. Only for coconut. Now you've given me an idea. Yuri, I should try. Let me see if I can get one of those old-fashioned things. Now, I don't know if any of the older viewers have ever tried using the garapinera to make ice cream. I reached that. There was already Magnolia ice cream with the flavor of the month. Even before World War II, there was Magnolia ice cream. But in the province, we wanted to make our own ice cream, especially the ubi and the mango and the makapuno and the buko. We made those at home. And the boys in the family were the ones. You had to churn that. And as it got thicker and thicker, you would need two hands to try to churn that. So I'm very happy that you want to make ice cream at home. It's just that little box. It's a plug-in ice cream maker.
The machine.
Yeah, it makes 1 quart of ice cream the easy way. Or just go to the supermarket. There's so many different kinds of ice cream now. Good heavens. Even here, I'm locked up. I haven't left the house since March. I get my ice cream delivered. Yeah, lots of things.
How long does it take to churn the ice cream?
Oh gosh, it takes an hour at least. And
okay,
you have to have dry ice in a sack with a lot of ice to lower the temperature still of the dry ice and keep it from melting. It's a messy experience, though. Trust me. Why the pictures like that? Oh, good heavens!
So we have the biscuit baking cards. I didn't know they were cards. I thought they were molds.
Yes. Once upon a time, you know those San Nicolas cookies? I think some of you may have heard of them. Well, anyway, once upon a time, to give cookies a very elaborate design, what you did was you put the dough on top of one of those, you see those wooden rectangular bars there. They call them cards. C-A-R-D-S, cards. And they were used in Europe. They're not just used here. So what you do is you get the dough and then you push the dough into the crevices. And then you cut around them to get your cookie. You could also have a stamp. You know, you stamp around those little designs and you get your cookies, then you bake them. And that's why the cookies before were really, they were beautiful because they had all that embellishment. The cookies looked like the elaborate carvings in the church.
Yeah.
They looked like the clothing with the heavy embroidery. It's because they had that kind of a tool. When you made a carroza before, you know those processional carriages with the old style with the silver that go around them? Okay. How did the silver get those designs? With something like those baking cards, but bigger. You put the silver or the brass on top, and you hammered it gently into the crevices. And then when you took out the metal, they already had those beautiful patterns, just like the cookies. That's the old style. I don't think I want to do that now.
It sounds very labor intensive, not going to lie. So up next, we have another poll questions for our listeners for this afternoon. Where are the kitchens in small houses located during Jose Rizal's time? So let's take a quick guess. So I think in Europe, the kitchen would be at the center of the home because it was very cold and it would keep everyone warm. But here, we're warm. So hint, hint, where do you think the kitchens are? Please answer it on the polls. We will have tiny squares that you can click to give us your answers. So yeah, we can't wait to see what you guys have to say or think. So when we were
that's also invented.
Pardon?
I'm sorry, go. If you're going through.
No, no, no.
Go ahead, Yuri. Your turn.
I think while we were going through the slides during the rehearsal, I never really thought about where the kitchen was because I was like, oh, it should be at the center of the house, right? Because I thought, like, from a Eurocentric point of view, it was always a place where everybody could go to. It was almost communal. So I was like, oh, it might be at the center of the house. But as I read the book, I was like, yeah, I don't think that's feasible for very small houses because of some logistic issues that we will explain later.
That's true. We're in the tropics. It's where it's hot. And that makes a very big difference.
Okay, so this photo is from Jose Rizal's home in, I think, Laguna. Yes.
Yes, in Calamba. I hope that I hope everybody has been there. And if you haven't been there, you really should go. After all, I mean, this is the home of Jose Rizal. Very, very important. Yes, you can see there again the idea of you have to have a well-ventilated kitchen. It had to be very cool. That's why the window is very important. And I was teasing our Chinatown Museum group. I said, the banguera, I think you noticed that the dishes and the glasses are being dried. Is that correct?
Yeah.
They're being dried there on the banguera. And notice that in many bangueras, the tops of the fence, call it a fence, are pointed. And that is because in Filipino legends, they're worried that the aswang will come into the house, will fly into the house through the kitchen window. So the protection is it's pointed to catch, prevent them from coming in. Yeah, but yes, in the Philippines and in other tropical areas, the kitchen has to be well ventilated and near the window.
Yeah.
Are they still answering? I gave the answer.
Most people said outside. 70% said outside. 25% says near the window, and then 5% says near the bedroom.
Well, it's also true about the kitchen being outside.
Yes.
If you have ever been to Batanes, you will see that in their place, they're so worried about fire because the winds there are so strong. So the kitchen is outside the house. So again, this is where you see the inventiveness of people. They create situations that solve issues. Like if there's this bad typhoon weather, we move the kitchen out. During festivals, when you need to cook a lot of food, it's not going to fit in your regular kitchen. So what do? You create a temporary kitchen outside your house. So there is cooking inside and there's cooking outdoors. Yes. Cooking outside the home. So this is our buying food outside the house, right?
Yes. So this is the Chino Pancitero. And so this is the man that would sell noodles. I guess in Binondo, it would be beside the Binondo church, but outside the cigarette factories. And then they would peddle to the working women. And this would kind of be like their lunch or their merienda. So, the vendors, I think, were they used to be ambulant, but the panciteros always had like a permanent slot because they were that popular among the people who were eating the food.
You're very correct, Yuri. And what I want to do is explain a little bit more that that painting was made in 1847 by a Filipino named Jose Lozano. It was made 1 year, just to help you out and remember, it was made 1 year before Jose Rizal's parents got married. So it's that time in Philippine history, 1 year before they got married. And the pancit that he was making, I'm going to read it. That pancitero, his pancit, consisted of thick noodles that were made of either rice or wheat flour, and that were fried with a little bit of shredded pork and local vegetables. So that was a very simple pancit. I'm sure many of you are thinking right now, oh my gosh, there are all kinds of pancit that maybe are your favorite foods. Maybe they included them in the favorite foods. But that is a depiction of a real event in 1847, because the Spanish government thought that it would start exporting cigars using tobacco that was grown in Ilocos. And they had, Yuri, there were anywhere from 8,000 to 12,000 women working in the cigar factory that was diagonally across from Binondo Church. So you can imagine how many panciteros would line up there near this old San Fernando Bridge to serve lunch to all those women who couldn't go back to wherever they lived because they had to come back, in the afternoon after lunch. So it's either they got their food from the pancitero, from that. Did we show the chino chanchalero already?
Not yet. It's after this slide, but here we have the carinderia.
Okay. Now, carinderia, what are they serving there? I don't know if any of these would fall under your favorite foods, but I wrote them down just to be sure, so you know that I'm not making this up. What was the carinderia food 1 year before the parents of Rizal got married? One was a dish called kare. So what was their kare? Their kare consisted of the feet of the cow, and then they boiled that with all the internal organs also of the cow, and they put cabbage. That was their kare. I'm sure today we're thinking of all kinds of kare, shrimp curry, and even kare. This is something else. What was the second dish that they were serving then? They called it fritada. So that gives you some idea. Maybe it's fried. And it was, again, cow meat and pork meat mixed together and fried. What was the third dish that they served? Mole. Now, mole is a Mexican dish, but it doesn't sound like the carinderia then was serving anything that tasted like a Mexican mole. Why are they all that color there? The food, take a look at it. It's kind of golden. Remember I said before that for parties, we like to have golden rice. So for us, having food that was kind of yellowish, golden, that was, to us, that means that the food tastes good. It's the look that we like. And they used a Mexican botanical called anato, or what we call achuete, to give it that coloring. So now you can, instead of having to take the little seeds yourself and dry them and then pound them and then mix the pounded seeds with either an oil or water and extract the color. Now you can just go into the supermarket and buy powdered achuete. So I'm very happy about that too. But see, so you can go to the pancitero, you can go to the carinderia, which was Filipino food. And then what else do we have? There was a third place where you could get food.
We have the Chino Chanchalero, who I guess like the past two they have their own stalls, whereas this man would probably be roaming around.
Yes. And so you say, well, what's a chanchalero? A chanchalero sold chanchal.
Chanchal.
Again, I'm going to read this so you're knowing I'm not making it up. What was chancha? Black gulaman. It was black gulaman. And they would serve it cut up and then with a syrup.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many of you there are, health food buffs. Like I'm kind of a little bit of a health food buff. And there's what they call Chia. Chia. Chia is a health food. It gives you a lot of energy. And it's a South American and Central American botanical, Chia seeds. But already, Chia seeds were being grown in China and being imported into the Philippines. And that chanchalero would mix the Chia seeds with the black gulaman. Now, if you take Chia and you put it in water long enough, it swells. It becomes like sago.
Yeah,
it becomes a little sago. So instead of sago, we were having gulaman with Chia in those days. And, there's no reason why we can't do it again. Also, he was selling pancit bihon. The little pancit bihon, you would chop that up. And then you would mix it with syrup. You could have it also with little mongos. And you could have all three. You could have the black gulaman with the Chia. You could have the mongo seed. And you could have the bihon all together in one dish with syrup. It's your choice. See, it's that diversity again. That's very Filipino. Mix. That's part of our food. And can you imagine that poor guy carrying that? Oh my gosh.
So much.
Yeah, heavy.
Okay. So while we're on the topic of meriendas and lunch, we have a poll question for you guys. What would you like to have for merienda? Is it A, pancit, B, pan de coco, C, turon, or D, kwek-kwek? So this is like barring all like the pandemic restrictions. So if that was totally out of the window, which one would you have? What about you, Tita? I think last time you answered pancit. Is it the same?
Yes.
Do you hold the same answer today?
No, now I think I want to have turon because my saba here. I'm in the kitchen, by the way, guys. I'm in my kitchen, so welcome to my kitchen. The saba is now ripe enough. It's the perfect consistency to make turon. So we're going to make turon later with a little bit of jackfruit. I hope you're getting hungry.
So you heard it here first. Those are Tita Felisa's plans after the live stream.
See, that's my street food. If I go to the street, I don't know about the rest of you there. What are your favorite street foods? There's Adidas. Oh, there's balot, fried
There's
balot.
chicharon.
There's chicharon. So many things. Kwek-kwek. No, there's kwek-kwek, those little quail eggs that are this orange. I said, what in heavens? The first time I saw that, I said, what is that, But again, you see, the street food has been adopting. Before, you had this huge, bottle filled with vinegar and all kinds of things. You weren't too sure what was in the vinegar. And you were supposed to get your fish balls or squid balls and take the whole thing on the stick and dip it in there. But can you imagine how unsanitary that is?
Yes.
So what have they done? Well, now they either have that squeeze bottle or they have the little plastic rations of all these things that you add onto your snacks. But street food is really part of our culture because, as I said, we don't want to go hungry. That's part of it. What we've seen here is different ways to keep us from feeling hunger pangs. So we're always eating something,
So the poll has come back.
Okay, what
48
wins?
people said banana Q. I think you sold them on on the banana Q. And then followed by 39% pancit. And then 9% balut. And then the lowest is pan de coco, which is sad because I would have voted for the pan de coco.
Don't let that stop you, Yuri. Go get your pan de coco.
Oh, don't worry, I won't.
But see, merienda is very important to us. Every time the tourism department comes and asks for advice, I always say, you must say that in the Philippines, merienda is a must. Because that's when everything comes out. You can have so that you can have the bigger, heavier merienda cena. And it's incredible what you have. It's not like having English tea, for instance, which is wonderful to have. But I mean, Filipino merienda is, again, such a wide variety. Buffet. It's a buffet of choices. So merienda is a must. Just as they say in the United States, I think they say breakfast. Breakfast, all day long breakfast. In the Philippines, it's probably day long merienda. Merienda is a must. You gotta have Filipino merienda.
So I think this slide, it's on the Chinoy merienda. So you had a quote earlier, which was, the history of food is the history of fighting hunger. Because, a lot of our Chinoy merienda classics are very affordable. They entered at a ground level. They were brought in by workers and other working class immigrants. That's why when we try to eat them, it's very accessible because it had to be made accessible to the immigrants. So it's also accessible, I guess, to us now that it's been passed down.
That's very true. I'm sure everybody here has heard of Mamon Luke. And what sometimes there's a story about Mamon Luke that sometimes is overlooked, but it's recorded in Filipino heritage, which we were part of in the 1970s. But Mr. Ma, what he would do is he had those long noodles and he had a pair of scissors. So he had the bowl and then he would cut the noodles to fit the bowl. And if he liked you a lot, he would cut it a little higher so that you would have just a little bit more noodle than common. Yes, it adopts. The pancit adopts, the mami adopts, everything adopts to what is affordable. So eating what we can afford is one way, definitely, to keep ourselves from hunger. But as we at the museum group and we were saying, you have to also remember that we shouldn't waste food. Yeah. Like before, isn't it we used to say, and I think the parents who are here and the grandparents who are tuned in and the teachers who are with us are also going to say, yes, we mustn't waste rice. Let's not waste rice. One little grain of rice that falls, before the missionaries used to say, one little grain of rice that falls, for every grain of rice you stay an extra day out of heaven. So everybody was worried they would eat all their rice. But we know, from a practical point of view, don't waste. And that also means don't get more than you can eat. Don't leave anything on the plate. That's part of the history of Filipino food. I don't know if you realize it, but it was Vic Villavicencio, when he set up his Triple V restaurants. He was the first to say, if you finish everything on your plate, this is the price. It's like a discounted price. If you leave anything on your plate, you pay more. Because all his restaurants were buffet restaurants. And he was just appalled. I remember he was talking about it to us sometimes. Just appalled at the waste of food. People would leave so much, and then they would have to throw the food away. So, again, it's part of our trying to be sure that we don't go hungry by never wasting what we eat and what we drink. You know, the water in the bottle, hang on to it and always finish your water. Water is extremely precious nowadays. Panaderia. Okay, there. Oh, Yuri, there's your pan de coco.
Yeah. I see it, kind of. So yeah, like as part of fighting hunger, I think it's important that food is made accessible in a variety of ways, and that the Panaderia is one of the, I think, leading institutions on that front. You know, they sell bread that's affordable and that caters to our taste. So we have an upcoming poll question about the fiesta this time. You know, like we're building up to a more festive chapter. During a fiesta, what is your role? Please tell us. Are you A, tagakain, B, taga-alok, C, tagaluto? So what is it that you do in a fiesta? You know, it's time to get honest. And really face up to what is it that you like to do best during a festivity. We'll wait for your question. We'll wait for your answers down below. So I was the one who came up with this question because we wanted the kids to be included. You know, we want them to have like an answer to it. So yeah, like the other questions we tried to come up with, it's like, you know, it's a bit, it kind of like excluded the rules. So here it's like, you know, everybody's included. Everybody can have an answer. What about you, Tita Feliz? What do you do on a fiesta?
Well, you know, I was cooking at a very young age. I was always hanging out in the kitchen. So, especially in Cavite, where my father was from, his aunt was very well known. His mother had died when he was a child, and so it was an auntie who became the surrogate mother, and her kitchen was very well known for its fiesta table, and she would invite all these special cooks to come, and you would see them on the floor level. They would put out mats, and then they would have these low tables for chopping boards, just chopping boards, and they would be chopping there. They'd be nursing their babies if they were still young. The babies would be crawling around. I remember that, and so I would kind of help when I was that young. But up to now, I do all the cooking. So when there's a fiesta, we cook. And we make alok. And we eat also. What's important also for us to understand is that during a fiesta, we have all those wonderful bakery products, like we saw the panaderia slide earlier. Well, now we combine panaderia fare with, that's all those baked goods that began when the Spanish introduced the idea of wheat bread, because we had no wheat and we had no baking oven, the horno, we didn't have that. That they brought to us. And now we have that side by side with things like calamay, bibingka, all these Asian types of food. All of that is part of our table, part of our fiesta fare. Even those who are not Chinese, they love to have, you know, the hopias and the tikoys and all of this, and the lumpia, all of that on their table. So it's Asian, Western, they all come together. That's part of being Filipino.
Okay.
That's fine.
So the answers have come back. And
What's
100% say tagakain. Nobody's making alok, nobody's cooking. And then there are a few loose answers. So may nagsabi na tagahugas, and then there's one multitasking. Very colorful, these answers.
I'm glad they're truthful answers.
They did get honest.
Yes.
So here we have some people who won our little contest. So we asked you guys to share what your meals look like at home, and then you would get a free copy of the book. So here are some of our contest winners. So here we have people enjoying family meals at home because, you know, family that eats together stays together, especially during the quarantine because there's no one else to eat with aside from our family. And then we have here Filipino families, you know, with smaller children and, you know, eating in places that are not necessarily the dining table, you know, which is also part of our culture that we kind of just eat anywhere and everywhere. And then lastly, we have, you know, we ask people where they eat, and most people still said their dining room. So we just like to thank all our contributors for sending in their photos. And yeah, we will arrange with you how we're going to send out the book because, you know, there's a pandemic. So yeah.
That's wonderful. You know, there are some blessings that this quarantine has forced upon us. And I think it really is that families are eating together now more than before, because before the schedules didn't always work out. You couldn't always eat together every day. Oh, I'm glad you put the Lazy Susan. I wonder how many of those watching have a Lazy Susan at home. Because we have one in our Tagaytay house. And I always associate the Chinese restaurants with the Lazy Susan, isn't it? So we were saying, so who is Susan? That's what we were trying to find out.
Yeah, and why is she lazy?
And why is she lazy? And it was so funny because it turns out nobody really knows. The story goes that Thomas Jefferson, the American who was responsible for, or who played a very big part in writing the American Constitution. So we're talking about the late 1700s. And they claim that he came from Europe. He had seen that Lazy Susan that turns around, and that his daughter named Susan felt that, you know, people weren't serving them at table, which was the tradition at the time, the custom at the time. And so they put that on the table so that it was easy for her to get her food. But then when the historians checked, he didn't have a daughter named Susan. There wasn't anybody in his household named Susan. Anyway, the Lazy Susan is useful because you can get your food easily. And I tell you though, there must be some etiquette among Chinese families that I haven't yet learned. Because I sit there at the pansiteria and I can never get my food because it keeps spinning and spinning, you know? And I have to tell the younger members of the family, hey, senior, can I get my food? But that became associated with Chinese restaurants in California, and not until the 1950s. And then after that, it just became standard, like even here in the Philippines. So anybody can claim to be Susan. Just try not to be lazy.
So Tita Feliz, just as a piece of advice, like there's no etiquette except at the start of the meal. So the start of the meal, the oldest person at the table gets to start the Lazy Susan. And then after that, it's just aggression from there on out. And you just have to watch who's done and then just grab it from there.
I tell you, it's really funny. It's very funny. Oh my gosh. Oh, chopsticks. Yes. You really have, in a Chinese meal, you really have to use chopsticks. Do you know that Jose Rizal, there is only one meal where that Jose Rizal wrote about in detail. He actually wrote down the menu. And that was for a Chinese laureate that he had in Hong Kong, and where they used chopsticks. But one of the most beautiful chopsticks I've ever used, Yuri, was 2 sticks of non-poisonous wood from my garden with little flowers still on them. And where did I get that idea? from a Japanese book that I have about chopsticks. I've been collecting books about chopsticks for, well, since the 1970s. And it turns out that chopsticks really began as two sticks of wood to help remove whatever you were cooking in a big cooking vessel. And then it eventually transferred to something for the table. And it's perfect for the kind of rice that is grown in the northern climate, what they call the Japanese strain of rice, because it's a little sticky. Whereas in the southern part, in the what they call the Indian kind of rice, it's not so sticky. So that's why we didn't invent chopsticks. The chopsticks were invented in the north where the rice could hold together. Whereas in the south, so you look at India, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, our eating habits are really we use our hands or we use a spoon because the rice just opens up, doesn't stick together. So again, the invention depends on the environment. Environment produces rice that's not sticky. Oh, kain na. Yes, that's what we should do after this. Kain na. Yes, these are wonderful illustrations by Margot Garcia, by Mariel Garcia, and they show you our different ways that we have traditional ways of celebrating, and that is a dulang. That drawing is from the 1800s, about the same time as Lozano.
Yeah.
Late 18 to late 1800s. But that's from Cebu. That one shows you Cebu. And the dulang is the low table. See, in the tropical areas like ours, everything is low. It's mat level. I guess maybe because it was hot. I don't know. But it's low level. We didn't have the high European tables. And in fact, I think the first European chair that ever came here was the chair that Magellan left with one of the local leaders. And that was the only time that we had a chair of that, where you really sit up higher at that level. And the missionaries, this one is really strange. The early missionaries, when they traveled from one community to another to try to make us Christian, they had their chair. The priest had a chair that was being carried everywhere he went. Imagine somebody to carry the chair. And he had his own cook. The cook had to go with him also because he had to spend all his time doing religious matters. So anyway, that's another story. But that's the dulang. And in the Philippines, when you say magmahabang dulang, you put many dulang. One dulang like a railroad train, one dulang after another. And that means that there's going to be a big celebration, like a wedding, perhaps. So then we have the Chinese table with the Lazy Susan, with my favorite Lazy Susan. And then that is beautiful. If ever you are invited to a Maranao celebration, a Pagana, please go. You will be surprised at the ritual. You will enjoy the chicken and the turmeric rice and the eggs and the sweets. They have different ways of making their biscuits, which we don't get in our panaderia. You get them though when you tour in the south. Don't miss it. It's beautiful. Maranao Pagana is really wonderful, wonderful. Especially when they come in their beautiful hand woven clothing. For them, gold is a royal color. That's why the food is golden. Don't miss it. I've only been to one and I've never forgotten it. Well, I hope that you've had a bit of an introduction to the history of Filipino food and its diversity. You know, I study Filipino food history not so much for what is my favorite dish. I study it because I want to know, if I learn about the food, what will the food say about who is the Filipino? Okay, so that's my research format. And in the process, I go through old dictionaries. Some of them are word lists from 1609, word lists from 1521, really old. This word, naya-naya, came out from an old Cebuano dictionary. I'd never heard the word before. It's a beautiful word that I think all of us who are Filipinos should be proud of. We should remember it and we should bring it back into our vocabulary. Naya-naya means to serve food, to cook food, to entertain others. That makes them happy, right? Naya-naya is to cook food. Okay? But naya-naya also means to be a happy person. So we don't just enjoy eating food, but we enjoy cooking food. We enjoy giving food. We enjoy sharing food. That's the Filipino way. That's what makes us happy. That is the recipe for Filipino friendship, hospitality, happiness. We share our food with others. So I hope that if you take anything away from this afternoon's little sharing about food history, it's this word, naya-naya. Remember it, naya-naya. That we as Filipinos, we are happy to cook, to serve, to entertain you and make you happy, because that also makes us very happy.
Okay, so moving towards our last slide. So, Tita, you gave us this very beautiful quote. Can you read it for us to just close us out?
Yes, I don't mind repeating that. There is history in every dish. And there is a story in every bite. And that story includes the story that you can tell about what you are eating. So I hope now that we're all together in this quarantine, this is the time. Tell stories about what you're eating. That's going to make the food taste even better.
Okay, thanks, Tita. That was very beautiful. I hope when we have our next meal, we can continue to think and talk about, the history of our food and the stories behind them and, why we eat the way we eat. So if you would like to order what kids should know about Filipino food and other Adarna books, you can get them on our museum shop. We will put a link down below on the comment section and on the event page. So again, if you would like to buy Tita Felisa's book on what kids should know about Filipino food and other Adarna books, you can buy them on our museum shop. The link will be on the comment section and on the event page. So if you would want to watch more of our live streams, you can go to our YouTube channel called Museums Matter. Again, you can learn more about Philippine history on our Museums Matter channel on YouTube. And for September, we have quite a few interesting things brewing along that we hope you can also come and support us for. So on September 5, we are having, for September 5 and 12, actually, we are having cool collections, or collections as we call them. On September 5, we will be featuring a Philippine coin collection by Angela Bernardo Jr., who is a numismatic collector. And then on September 12, we will be talking about Filipino blades with Michael Cabato, Alan Ebora, Rainier Zapata, Raimunda Lucero, and Randy Salazar. So, it's a bit niche, but if that's what you like, we're here for you. And then on September 18, which is a Friday, we will be having Professor Roy Mendoza over for the Martial Law Museum. So we're going to teach you how to explore and what are the contents of the Martial Law Museum, which is an online museum that you can find on the internet. So this is my last full show with the museum. Thank you all for listening. I hope you can continue to support History Matters over here at Chinatown Museum. This is Yuri Tsumura signing out. Bye!